If you unbust a myth, does that mean that you've just busted a myth? Hi there guys, my name is Zach and welcome to my channel. Amongst other things, I'm a reenactor and a jouster. And I really like swords. In fact, that's probably one of the main reasons I became a reenactor in the first place, was the opportunity for me to dress up in armor and hit my brother with swords. But having reenacted for quite a while now, there are a few things that are said, often by reenactors, often by historians, you often even see it on TV, about swords that I just wanted to go through and talk about. So one of the things that people will often say about swords is that they were a status symbol. One of the mistakes we make as a society as a whole is to consider all of history as one homogeneous era. Not everything is the same. And there's a lot of nuance that goes into this sort of thing. One of the most well-known swords probably in most people's imaginings is the Roman gladius. And the Roman gladius was not really a status symbol. Every legionary in the entire Roman army carried a gladius. So we're not talking about just the cream of the crop here. Even after the fall of the Roman Empire, there would have been loads of those swords hanging around. They would have been used. Later on in history, in the medieval period, we see all sorts of swords and sword-like objects, like the German Messer, being used in all stations of society. It's not really my area of expertise, but there's even an example from China. This is an LK Chen Chinese Dao. And this sword would have been owned by the government and issued to the soldiers in the Royal Army. So while it was absolutely true that for some periods of history, swords were a status symbol, it absolutely is not true for the entirety of history. In the late medieval period, for example, you could very much expect most people to be able to own something like this. How do we know that? Well, there were laws all throughout Europe which said that people were not allowed to carry their swords in towns, except for if they were a knight or another noble. So what this law is saying is that only nobles are allowed to carry their swords. Now that does say swords are a status symbol, but they're not a status symbol because no one is able to afford them. At that point in history, they're a status symbol because only people of a certain rank are allowed to carry their swords. Another thing that people will often say, and I've heard this so many times from reenactors, is that a sword is useless against plate armor. Now, this is one of those myths that is so dangerous because it is basically true and also completely false. If I was to go against someone in full plate armor and just start swinging, then that would be the end for me. This sword would do nothing against late 15th century plate armor. The thing is, swinging at people isn't all that swords were good for. All throughout fight manuals, we see different ways of using swords, and particular attention is paid to using swords against plate armor. There are so many ways of doing it, and that is why the sword remained the sidearm of choice throughout the medieval period. No matter how good the armor became, there was still a way that you could use a sword to get through it and to damage the person inside. Was it as easy as using a sword against someone unarmored? Absolutely not. But was the sword useless? No, it wasn't. In this way, the sword is basically the spork of the medieval weapons. It might not be the best in any given situation, but it is still usable in pretty much every situation. Well guys, those are a couple of sword myths that I just wanted to bust. I've seen them in a few videos recently and I felt like it was important to start talking about this subject. Do let me know if you agree with this, if you can think of any other sword myths that you've heard around, maybe around reenactments or other videos that we can talk about. If you want to support the channel, you can share this video. You can find my Patreon in the links down below. Big shout out to my Knight Patreons especially. Your names are appearing on the screen right now. And I will see you all in my next video. Thank you very much, guys, and goodbye.